Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey Health Junkies, on this episode of the Health Fix podcast, I'm interviewing Dr. Kelly McCann. She's a board-certified physician in internal medicine and pediatrics. She's trained in functional, integrative, and environmental medicine. She is known for her expertise in mold illness, chronic infections, MCAS, and complex chronic conditions. She integrates science, intuition, and spiritual psychology to help people heal at the deepest levels. And in fact, she went and got her master's in spiritual psychology, which is really cool. And I really wish I would have done that before I started seeing patients. So huge. Now, through her private practice known as the Spring Center in Costa Mesa, California, she has transformation programs. She guides clients through suffering to sovereignty and reclaiming their health with purpose and power. She's hosted 3 worldwide summits reaching over 100,000 people, and she is an author of a forthcoming book that explores how illness is not the enemy, but a portal to healing the whole self. And she's also working on a project called the Unforgetting project. So stay tuned for that. At the time of this podcast, it's not released quite yet, but we'll keep you up to date on that one. Now, the other really cool thing that Dr. Kelly presents in this podcast is the idea that maybe having health conditions isn't a bad thing. When we look at what is the message the body's trying to give us through this illness, what is our opportunity for growth that we can take from this? How can we transform our health and our total body wellness by looking at whatever we're struggling with a complex illness as not being bad, but a springboard to transform our health? We dive into how the body's symptoms are messages, wake-up calls, little nudges to say, hey, it's time to do something about this. It's time to do something about that. Let's get our health back on track. Let's get our desires. Let's get ourself. And that's really what Dr. McCann is talking about. She's really wanting you to not forget who you are, not forget your true self. Good stuff here. I look forward to hearing what you guys think of this podcast. So let's introduce you to Dr. Kelly McCann. Dr. Kelly McCann, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Jannine. I'm really happy to be here.
Boy, I'm looking forward to our conversation because just chatting before we hit record, we have a lot in common in terms of thinking about chronic illness. And kind of, a lot of people are calling it root cause medicine and this and that, but really at the root, I think there's many roots in chronic illness. And I'm thinking you're probably at the same thought process in that department.
Yeah, there are definitely big buckets. I see them of root causes, and that can be mold, chronic infections. Of course, up in Wisconsin, you see, I'm sure, a lot of Lyme disease and tick-borne illnesses. Environmental toxicants is a huge piece that I think conventional medicine has no clue about, EMF, etc. And then, even deeper though, underlying that is the thoughts, the beliefs that we have about ourselves. Am I worthy, for love, for being on the planet, all of these things, all these misperceptions and misbeliefs that we have, limiting beliefs that we have, our connection to ourselves and our spirit. I think at the root, that's what leads us to be energetically more susceptible to mold, infections, and environmental toxicant exposures.
I couldn't agree more. And I think you probably came to this conclusion after some years of looking at okay, how do I, find the right protocol? And then you're going through it and you're like, well, these protocols aren't working. People aren't getting better. What am I doing wrong? I don't know if this happened to you, but it definitely was a little bit of the trajectory I felt for the first probably decade of my career, wondering what is wrong? What's going on? Why am I not helping? Did you experience anything like that along the way?
You know what? Yes and no. Fortunately for me, I actually got a master's in spiritual psychology at the University of Santa Monica starting in 2008 to 2010. That's when I started my practice here in Southern California. And so my understanding of the mind, body, spirit, and how closely linked they were was really embedded in the beginning of my practice. And so it informed how I showed up for patients and how I perceived patients. And for those patients who are willing to look at themselves, look at their lives, look at their beliefs a little bit differently, they were the ones that got better. You know, the people who were stuck in a victim mentality, who were not open to the possibility that the mind and the body are linked, and that came in and like, fix my body, my will, my spirit, you know, my brain, well, not my brain, but, you know, my will and my spirit, my drive is good, but my body is failing me. Those people who had this deep schism between the mind and the body, they continue to struggle because we are not mechanics. You know, we're not robots. We are flesh and blood that is imbued with energy and life force in every single cell in the body. And so the idea that these two things are separate is crazy, and I blame Plato and Descartes and unfortunately Christianity, because they, you know, think the body is terrible. At least the early forefathers did, you know. So when we start to think about the human being having a spiritual experience, or spiritual beings having a human experience, and I'm not talking about religion or anything like that. I mean, most people know when you look at somebody who's alive, when you look at somebody who's deceased, they're different. Mm-hmm. There's fundamental differences between something that's alive and something that's not. Whether you believe in God or not doesn't really matter. We know that there is something that enlivens us, right? And that thing that enlivens us is our spirit, our intuition, our soul, and we have to pay attention to that in healthcare, in our lives. We can't separate them. I bring up Descartes. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And so we put the mind and the will as supreme, and the body is like, you know, this vehicle that you move around in the world with, but it's just dust, right? That may be the case, but it's still what we've got right now.
Yeah. There's so many different things I can kind of ping off of there because I'm like, yes, the early forefathers, there's definitely, you know, we've kind of been, dare I say, brainwashed into thinking that, yeah, there is that disconnect. And then there's the coping mechanism of disconnect that goes even further. And I think for many women that have felt like their bodies are betraying them, I'm going to say that for references because I hear it a lot, especially in midlife when things really do start to shift. But it's also, and I'd love to get your idea here, it's also an incredible spiritual time because we're kind of really getting to the point where we're awakening, where, you know, maybe the kids are out of the house, maybe we're getting to a point where we're starting to figure out, like, who am I? What is going on? So it's a very fascinating time in life where I feel like energetically we're almost set to have this. And at the same time, we're not acknowledging as much as we could in the medical system as to how these things happen.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that you bring this up because I think, you know, in the world of complex chronic illness, it's sometimes easier to see, but the truth is we all have stuff, you know, that we have come to believe about ourselves. Some of it starts in childhood, some of it gets piled on later through our life experiences. And, you know, what I'm really proposing is body isn't against you. It's not betraying you. In fact, it had your back this whole time, right? And what's happening is it's giving you messages. And I know that sounds very cliche, but let me explain. So imagine that our bodies are a little bit like a driver assist car, right? And I know I just said we're not robots, but just go with me here. So you're in a driver assist car. If you've ever been in one, you start to veer off the lane. Like, I don't know. In my Lexus, the wheel shifts, right? Okay. That's just feedback, right? It's just feedback. And you do it enough, my little thing would come up with a coffee cup and say, time to take a break. Right. I love that. I was like, oh, that is so cute. I love that, right? So what if the messages that we get, the symptoms that we experience, it's just feedback. It's just your spirit, your intuition, your body, all working in synchronicity to give you feedback. Hey, going off course. You're not living in alignment with who you're meant to be on the planet and how you're meant to show up. Because you have these beliefs that you have to be superwoman, that you have to do everything for your kids, or you have to take care of your aging parents, or you have to be a certain way or do a certain thing, show up a certain way. And what if that belief is not true, right? So if we could just start with the possibility of maybe your body isn't against you, and see where that takes you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like the comment you made about, your thoughts, because for my entire life, till I started studying spirituality, I kind of thought exactly that, which many people do. What I come up with my brain, I think, therefore this is what's reality for me. And I think for a lot of people, coming to that conclusion, like, wait, I think things that aren't even real? What? Are you serious? How do you work with folks on that level? Because, one of the biggest things I find in chronic illness and also perimenopause, menopause, a lot of, I'll call them women's issues, women are often told like it's in their head. And so then we go, how do I tease out this concept? It's in my head, but it isn't, but it is. How do we tease that out? How do you help folks to kind of think that through? Because I'm sure you get folks that have seen 20 plus doctors coming in to seeing you, and they've been gaslit, they've been, all those things. Yeah. What do you do?
It's often not where I start, right? That's where we jumped in today because
yes,
I'm kind of excited about this concept and I think it needs to get out there more, but it's not where I start. I'm present. I'm with the person where they're at. They're still very much, many of my patients have mast cell activation, they have mold exposure, all the same things that you're seeing too, I'm sure, Jannine. And we got to get them to feel a little bit better, right? If you feel like crap 24/7, there's no bandwidth for dialogue about spirit, right? It would just be almost a fete because that's not where somebody is. So it's really about the timing and understanding the other person's capacity for hearing what we're talking about. I've had patients that I have this one patient I just remember. She came in, she's in her 30s, not menstruating at all, right? She's got an 8-year-old daughter, not menstruating at all, oxalate issues, all sorts of issues, just no sense of joy, no happiness. She, every review of systems was checked. She felt terrible all the time. Couldn't really tolerate methylated supplements, and it was probably a year and a half, almost 2 years before finally I was like, oh, you're ready. Let's have a conversation, right? It was just this recognition that she was ready for this kind of conversation. And I have to tell you, I saw her last week and barely recognizable. This woman was glowing, absolutely glowing. She's now studying to be a medical intuitive. She has so much joy in her life. And it's amazing to witness, absolutely amazing, a transformation, unrecognizable. And I think it's in part because she was willing to go there. In fact, she was more than willing. As soon as we had this conversation, she went out and got a book that I recommended. I love Amy Scher's book, How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can. Amazing book. I highly recommend it. Amy Scher's delight, and she's awesome. And this patient used it as a workbook. And Amy writes out different sections, and she's asking questions and encouraging you to ask yourself similar questions and do muscle testing to figure out, like, what are the answers? What are the root causes for you? What are the issues? What are the beliefs that you're stumbling against, you're hitting up against? And then she gives you tools of how to, process those misbeliefs and clear them using emotional freedom technique and a variety of other techniques. And then this woman went on and she did a little bit of the Gupta program, and she took some stuff from that. She did the Amy Apigian's biology of trauma work, and then she started working with other healers and other medical intuitives, and just went on and on and on, and taking bits and pieces of the things that worked for her. And that's the other thing too. I find a lot of times people are like, I did the Gupta program and that didn't work.
Yeah, I hear that often.
That is not how it works. You got to do the work. The program won't fix you.
Right.
So a lot of this is about a conversation from the practitioner side. When is this person ready to have these conversations? And oftentimes it's a nudge here. It's a suggestion there. It's a, would you consider, what about the possibility let's reframe this. These kinds of ideas within the context of just general follow-up. So we're talking about mold, and we're talking about these different protocols and the supplements and doing the testing and things like that. And, it's paying attention to the opportunity of when people speak and say, they may say something with a little negative bent to it. And hearing that, really listening and offering, well, what if you thought about it this way? What if you thought about it this way? One of my other patients with mast cell and POTS, the first time she came in, it had taken her 2 weeks to fill out my paperwork to come in. And then she had to rest for like 2 weeks afterwards because it was so exhausting just to fill out the paperwork. And she had to lay down the entire appointment because whenever she sat up, her heart rate was in the 140s. And she couldn't perfuse her brain and participate in the conversation. And, fast forward 1.5 years, 2 years, she's really starting to get better. She's able to walk around and function. And her husband decides he wants a divorce. And she's absolutely devastated. She's like, this is what we've been working for years. They've been together for 15 years before that, right? And now she's finally getting better. And she was saying, he's been my rock. He's the only person who's been there for me. And I said, no, that's not true. You're the constant. And just that simple reframe of like, yeah, her body seemed to be against her. She definitely felt it at one point. But when she was able to reframe the fact that, no, her body was actually doing the best that it could, and it kept her going this entire time. And not only that, she was the one constant that she could rely on. How beautiful was that? To be able to, look at a divorce and be sad, of course, right? But then to recognize that she had all the tools and all the skills and all the capacity to be there for herself and to find a practitioner to partner with and to get better.
So huge. It's interesting how this does seem to happen. The divorces will show up in the midst of someone working on their health. And I don't know, spiritually, I always think is it the energy shifting things, what's happening. So I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit too on what other types of resources you might recommend for folks when this happens, because I wish it wasn't so, but I would say in probably 50% of the cases this does seem to show up, or at least marital issues will show up for the folks. How much of it's your spiritual, your energy changing compared to your partner, and your partner being like, whoa, who's this now?
Yeah, I do think it's a lot of that. Gosh, I remember probably in the early 2000s, there was a book called The Dance of Intimacy. And she wrote a lot of books, similar type books, Harriet Warner, I think. And it was about exactly that. When you change the steps of the dance, that forces the partners to either change with you or step back, right? There are only kind of two possibilities there. If you're going to stay in partnership, they're gonna keep up with you, or they're not. I would say that we love to believe that our marriages are forever, right? Nobody goes into a marriage with the expectation that they're going to get divorced, hopefully. And yet people grow and people change. And sometimes that's I don't know. Personally, I believe in karma, whatever people believe. But, I think that there's a season for things. Just like we may not have the same friends that we did when we were 5, right? It doesn't really work that way. People come in and out of our lives, and they're there for a reason. We're in each other's lives for a reason, and then sometimes it's time to move on, and we need different people, different energy. And I'm really trying to take the perspective as much as possible that nothing is bad. Right? I think this dichotomy of good and bad, it really is very harming in the broad sense of things. I definitely believe that there are evil people in the world. That's pretty clear. But I think when we're talking about, the general population living your life, I want to see the good. I want to believe that things have purpose and meaning and significance, and even if something hurts, we have this perception that pain is bad, feeling bad is bad, I don't want that, So there's a lot of judgment about experience that is more harmful than useful. What if life is just a school and what we're here to do on the planet is to grow, evolve, change, understand ourselves better, live our purpose? When we are being ourselves and we're living our purpose, we feel joy, we're in flow, we feel love, we feel happy, and those are the most magical things in the world. And yet we have these perceptions that we have to be a different way, right? We have to make money, we have to, be a good mom, be a good wife. And yeah, those things are true, but you can still do it in your own way. We should be showing up in our own lives the most authentic versions of ourselves. And when we do that, everything gets better. Everything is in flow. And when we have hard times, that's opportunity. It's opportunity for growth and change. You know what? We learn best through adversity.
Yeah. I think that's a fascinating way to reframe chronic illness in particular as what is the lesson the body's trying to tell you? What is the story here? Or what it, obviously like you're mentioning before the symptoms, they're just messages like, hey, I didn't like this. Hey, I like this better. And the good and bad, oh my gosh, if we go deep into that, and I don't necessarily want to go down this rabbit hole, but it's the food stuff, and I think for many women, good food, good behavior, bad behavior. And this can get so deeply rooted. And I can see how many women in particular would have such deep connection to, am I a good girl? Was I good today? Kind of a thing. And it seems very rudimentary, but at the same time, I can see how these things could really tie in and move into something else. But at the end of the day, if we flip it and look, like you said, at what is the story? What is our body evolving, and trying to explain? It takes a little bit of the pressure off of the chronic.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off. It takes the victimhood off. It takes, what I tell my patients who are in it, right? They definitely don't feel well. They're struggling. And if we're having these kind of deeper meaning conversations, I say, you know what? I think your being, soul, whatever you want to call it, came and said, I want to learn this as fast as I can and evolve as quickly as I can to show up as my authentic self as fast as I can, right? They're on the bullet train to getting to that objective, because you can't ignore stuff when you feel like crap.
Absolutely. Especially when you're saying, if we go into MCAS for a second, because I joke lovingly with some of my patients. It's like, okay, we've got to put you in a bubble. But why do we put you in a bubble? To help the body figure out what's up. It's almost like the protective bubble so that you can work on figuring out what your body really wants and needs.
Right. Yeah, it gives you the bandwidth. So going back to, more medical stuff, it's
yes.
calming down the MCAS, calming down the symptoms, working with the nervous system, the vagus nerve, the limbic system, calming all that stuff down so you have more bandwidth to start to investigate, okay, what are these symptoms trying to show me? What is the message? And the other piece that I love about the body is that it's a map. It's a map. We have the traditional Chinese medicine, meridian system, we have the chakra system, we have metaphor. We talk about metaphor in English, right? I have butterflies in my stomach because I'm anxious. Well, what's that chakra, right? That is how that's our third chakra. That's like our, soul center. It's how we present ourselves to the world. And there are many experts in this and many resources in this that can start to provide ideas for entry. For example, so many women have thyroid issues, right? Let's look at the thyroid. Where is it? Right here over the voice box. Between the head and the heart. Are you speaking your truth? Are you living in alignment with your head and your heart? Not the truth that you think that somebody else wants to hear. The truth of who you are, connecting your heart and your head in coherence and speaking that out in the world.
Gosh, what comes to mind is Louise Hay. right?
Yes,
He's
yes.
genius for all of those connections to emotions and organs. And yeah, the thyroid's a biggie. The heart too. The heart with palpitations. We have a lot of folks with AFib and PVC, so premature ventricular contractions for those of you who go, like, what is a PVC? But those kind of things, the heart center, you mentioned coherence. One of the things that I've found, and I'd love to kind of bring in a little bit of what I find, and I want to hear kind of what you'll do often with those. But before I see patients, I'll often put my hands on my heart and just kind of breathe for a little bit. Before podcasts, I'll do that too, just to kind of feel things, because I don't think for probably at least 40 years of my life that I even connected in. And I went to naturopathic medicine school, and we think, all kinds of woo-woo stuff's going on there. But the truth is, they were trying to be so Western that they forgot about a lot of our roots. And a lot of us came out of there not having these connections.
Yeah. More allopathic than MDs.
Exactly. Like almost now I'm like, it's shameful, because I love how you went to school. I love how you went to school. You had the training of the spirituality background, right off the bat. If I feel like, dang, I'm jealous. If I would have done that right off the bat, right? I could have helped a lot more folks in the beginning, but at the same time, we're all on our own journey, so I'm not going to guilt myself.
Exactly. Don't do that. Don't do that. Who knows? This podcast may change your trajectory completely.
It definitely, and that's what I'm hoping for folks listening too, is because it is something that, I've gently been knocking on doors with the podcast mentioning these kind of things, but looking at the heart, looking at the thyroid, so huge. The adrenal glands and the kidneys. I would love to hear how you talk about the spiritual connection there with those adrenals and the kidneys and all of that stuff. Give us your side of it.
Yeah, so in traditional Chinese medicine, I was trained as a medical acupuncturist, so I did the Joe Helms course and all that. I don't practice acupuncture now, but I really appreciate, because who's got time with complex chronic illness to do acupuncture? I send them to an acupuncturist. They're better served that way. But in traditional Chinese medicine, there is no adrenal gland, it's the kidneys. And so those energetically are one and the same. And, I do believe that we all come into this world with a certain bank of constitutional energy, which is kidney chi, right? And that's just kind of where we are. It's from our parents, it's our genetics, it's our epigenetics, it may be our karma. And then we have the capacity to spend it, and spend it unwisely, or conserve it and spend it not frugally, with a conscience, I guess. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've really realized is that it's exhausting to not be yourself. And how hard is it to continually not be yourself and put on a mask for your husband, for your kids, for your friends, for everyone in your life, because you don't think that you deserve to show up, right? And how depleting is that going to be to your adrenal and your kidney chi? And I don't always explain it this way with the spiritual piece, and certainly I think my evolution as a functional medicine doctor has been that 10 years ago it was all about the adrenals. Now I understand that, adrenals and leaky gut. And now I understand that, well, if you don't address the mold and the chronic infections and, all of those things are surreptitiously going behind your back and depleting your adrenals, right? Yeah. So, but ultimately, as we started out the conversation, it's who you are at the core and whether or not you're allowing your true self to show out and be shared with the world that is the most depleting. Because energetically, if we don't have good boundaries, if we're not really good at saying, okay, this is my stuff and this is everybody else's stuff, if we're not good at that, that's the signal that we're sending to our immune system. Mm-hmm. Of course our immune systems are not going to work right. Because we don't have good psychological, emotional, and energetic boundaries. How is our immune system going to follow our lead?
Yeah.
It can't, right? It's going to say, well, this might be foreign. It might be good for me. It might not be good for me. I don't really know, because I don't have a good blueprint.
Yeah.
So I think all of these things are very depleting to the adrenal glands and the kidneys.
That was fabulous description of kidney chi. I see it quite often. It's kind of the mask of, put on the good wife face, put on the, whatever it may be. And also with friends, also with coworkers, careers. I think that's a big one for a lot of people. What I love about what you're saying is like, that connection to depletion. And if we go even further to perimenopause, menopause, our kidney chi and the grounding with our heart energy, yin and yang, since kidney so yin, for those of you who are like, what in the heck is she talking about right now? Guys, I'm talking about the balance in Chinese medicine, yin and yang. But we'll see this come up very often in midlife, where it seems that this is the time where we are hitting our walls with the battery's been depleted as far as it can go, and then we really start to tip that scale. Do you tend to see that kind of happening for women as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a variety of different things, and there might be a couple of different classes of how we show up with perimenopause and menopause. I definitely see sort of, yin and yang, masculine and feminine energy imbalances. If somebody is a go, very masculine energy, like entrepreneur, business person, etc., they might have more difficulties because the body is really calling you back to your feminine side to try and balance those energies. I mean, I really think we are here not only to be like our most authentic selves, we're here to be as balanced as possible. That's why the symbol of yin and yang is a perfect balance of masculine and feminine. And so, that might be one group of women's experience, that they're too masculine and then they're fighting that battle of that feminine energy, not having enough of it. On the converse, on the opposite side, then it can be that same sort of thing where there's too much feminine energy, not enough masculine energy, or beliefs about ourselves like, the crone is not valuable in society, getting older is a terrible thing, and there's a lot of resistance about getting older, and beliefs that you're no longer valuable if you're not this beautiful person or this younger woman. So I think there's a lot of stuff potentially to unpack. And you're right, the body is saying, okay, time out. You can't get to ignore this stuff anymore. We're no longer sweeping it under the rug. You gotta face some things. And if we bring in this idea of the body as a map, and the map provides the clues of where you need to do the work internally. That's what I mean by a map. And we can use things like Louise Hay, we can use things like traditional Chinese medicine and the chakra system, and any kind of metaphor that you can come up with. I mean, the thing that's beautiful is that there are systems of ideas about these metaphors, but ultimately it comes down to, how is it that you are showing up with yourself in this situation? At the University of Santa Monica, we say, how you are with the issue is the issue.
You go a lot of directions on that one.
I know.
And especially like the way I look at it, I see it in terms of the manifestations of the different, illnesses. How you are with the issue is how things will show up. Quite frankly, is how I see it. It seems,
Yeah.
No. Go ahead.
I guess I was gonna say one more thing. I also think that many of my mast cell patients have a history of trauma in their life, and it doesn't have to be sexual abuse, although many times it is. It doesn't have to be physical abuse. It can be neglect. Neglect is a huge driver for feelings of inadequacy. Last year we lost Beth O'Hara, who's a real light in the world. Never really got her full story, even though we worked together on a virtual summit for mast cell activation, but I got the sense that her upbringing was much more about neglect, that she just didn't feel that love from her parents, and the illnesses themselves are calling us forward to really look at and heal not just the physical body, but the emotional, psychological, and spiritual issues that and misbeliefs that we have developed because of our experiences, whether they're big T traumas or little T traumas. And I talk about trauma because I think it's important, but if we are able to reframe even the way that we think about trauma as, yes, it was a terrible experience, but it's all for your growth and learning so that you can become that person. And I'm not saying that sexual abuse is good or any kind of abuse is good, but if we can pull back from that judgment, which clouds our ability to see the silver lining or gain wisdom from that experience, I think we'll get a lot further. It's kind of like with cancer patients. When you get that diagnosis of cancer, the way that society thinks about it is, bam, all of a sudden your life is potentially finite, as if it wasn't before. But
right.
Nobody gets out of here alive. But, we have this perception. Bam, you get this diagnosis of cancer. Okay, I got to change my life. I got to do whatever it takes, right? And many people will take cancer as a wake-up call, and oftentimes afterwards they'll say, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, was to get cancer. With complex chronic illness, all we have is this slide into feeling terrible, and we don't really know how to stop the slide, and we don't really know how to fight the slide, because we don't have that, bam, you got to do something about this.
Yeah. So it's so true. I totally see that slide where it goes slow and, we can easily push it off and be like, I got to keep, for an entrepreneur, typically what I'll see often is like, I got to keep going. My business needs me. My kids need me. I got to keep going, push it to the side. Whereas, cancer's a little different.
Yeah. For some reason, it gets a different weight in our society. I'm hoping that these kinds of conversations can change that, because we all deserve to be happy. We all deserve to be in love with our lives, right? Mm-hmm. That's the goal. That's the purpose, to live the life that you want, right? Mm-hmm. And yet we have these beliefs that keep us stuck. I should do this. I should do that. I should be this. I should be that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's throw that out and see who you are and where you want to be.
Absolutely. I think that needs to be kind of the mantra for what we need to be putting out on social media. My personal opinion, yes, hormones can help, but I would love to see this much more than, here's your hormone replacement therapy for everything. It's going to solve all your problems.
Yeah.
And that's part of, one of the things that I think a lot of people in the chronic illness space, when you see the backslide, you start grasping for straws. You're looking for that miracle. You're desperate to get an answer. You're desperate to have some relief, and understandably so, but also looking at that, hey, you are free to be who you want to be. Your message is so on point with how I see it too. It's just so huge.
So I finally came up with a name. I've been struggling for the past 6 months, trying to figure out what to call this. It's the Unforgetting Project. And here's why. I told my mom this like a month ago, and she's like, why not just remembering? What's the difference between unforgetting and remembering? And I'm like, well, remembering is kind of like you remember a fact, you remember a date, you remember, I have to go pick up milk before I come home. Well, hopefully it's not real milk, but anyway, sorry. You guys are from Wisconsin. We don't drink real milk in California.
It's okay. I'm probably the weirdo within Wisconsin here, to an extent. But yeah.
Anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. Okay. Remembering is facts, right? Unforgetting is more about removing the very thin veil of the distance between ourselves and the truth of who we are. We just forgot. We forgot when somebody scolded us when we were little kids that we shouldn't be so loud, or we shouldn't do this, or we should be this. Good little boys do this, good little girls do this. We've forgotten who we truly are because of the stuff of the world, right? And our objective is to unforget. And when we unforget that, because it's right there, it's so close, it's always accessible to us, then we can really flourish.
Absolutely. Moving into the Unforgetting Project, we got to talk about the Spring Center. And I'm super curious why, because you've got the Unforgetting project. What's the meaning behind the Spring Center? I'm wondering if that'll mean.
I started the Spring Center in 2010, I think, 2009, 2010. And I really loved the idea of like growth and rebirth and, an adjective or moving forward. So it's got a lot of beautiful connotations, and my favorite colors are blue and green. I was just really playing on this whole theme of rebirth and growth. That's where that came from. And the Spring Center is our brick and mortar practice in Southern California. I do have medical licenses in 12 other states and have the capacity to do telehealth elsewhere, although we do ask all patients to come to California to be seen in person. And I have a medical team who works with me who are fantastic. They've been with me for a while now, and they're able to navigate and manage the complex chronic illnesses that of the people who show up. And then you can find me on social media at Dr. Kelly McCann, and I also have a website where I have blogs and webinars and more resources. And then we're in the process of building out a website, designing a logo, building out a website for the Unforgetting project, and I anticipate having a course at the beginning of the year. So eventually there'll be a wait list for people who are interested.
Awesome. We'll make sure we get that in our notes at drjkrausenD.com. I'm fascinated by what you guys are doing. And of course, guys, for those of you wondering where in California, Costa Mesa, California is where she is located. You're bringing folks in. So is it like a VIP day where they spend a couple hours with your PAs? How does it work? I'm very curious.
So people will fill out paperwork ahead of time. We're transitioning to a new electronic medical record, so we actually have a wait list while we're tweaking it. It's AI based, so it helps us with the transcription and the medical dictation, and then, helping the providers be more efficient. People can spend longer periods of time. Oftentimes they don't, but it might be more helpful. Usually it's just an hour plus. And then if people are coming from a long way away, and they're interested in doing like IVs or seeing the practitioners a couple days in a row, if that's a possibility, we do recommend that. I have a couple patients, when they do come in to see us annually, they'll stay for 2 or 3 days. At this moment in time, we are still billing insurance, and so for insurance purposes, there's a certain amount for reimbursement. So it's an hour for a new patient and 30 minutes for follow-ups. But if you have, 3 30-minute appointments after your initial, that can be very valuable, and we can go deeper and deeper each time. So that's how it's structured right now.
Power to you for sticking with the insurance. It's something. I know it's helpful for a lot of people.
It is, yeah. It's a membership-based model as well. So we do bill insurance and then have people pay extra for the membership, and they do have to become a member of the practice and pick a membership level. And the membership level that you choose depends on your needs. So, for people who do have complex chronic illness, oftentimes they need to be seen at least monthly in order to really get on top of things. And so they are encouraged to pick a higher level plan because financially that would be the best option for them. So that's how that works.
Nice. And last but not least, you had mentioned, and this is something I'd love to hear from kind of your perspective, chronic illness and really working with the spiritual side of things takes time. And I heard you say you've worked with someone, a year, 2 years, things of that nature. On average, just so folks get a little sense of how it works, what's the average amount of time that you find that you work with folks?
Well, for the folks who are local, they become so loyal they'll never go away, but the frequency with which I'm seeing them obviously reduces substantially, and that's really the goal. Everybody's a little bit different. It can be 6 months and they're doing great. That's really on the super fast, super bullet train side. Most people, I would say it's like a year to 2 years before they feel solidly, I'm in a better place. But, I saw a woman yesterday, she's been with me for 2 months, and she sees substantial improvements just in those 2 months. She's got complex chronic pain Not sure why she's on narcotics, and trying to find a pain doctor to prescribe narcotics is really challenging these days. And she was recently in a flare around her menstrual cycle, which is very common with a lot of folks. Rather than being in bed for a week afterwards, she was able to actually still kind of function, still be able to go spend some time with her friends. And she didn't feel great, but her level of functionality improved substantially just in a couple of months. So my encouragement to people out there listening is to know that it's going to take time, but you're not going to feel as terrible as you feel right now. You're going to see slow incremental progress. And then at some point there's a real turning of the corner and you kind of take off. It really does depend on the person. It depends on what they're dealing with. I've been really honing my skills and using my intuition to as I'm sure you do too, Jannine, as all good practitioners do, you hone your intuition. Like, I've got 300 different supplements I can give this person. Which ones do I start with? Where do I start? And having that intuitive sense as to what's going to be good for somebody. And everybody is different, but honing that sense and then figuring out what are the order that I need to add things in, super important. And that has been really profoundly helpful. Many of my colleagues are like, okay, you have mast cell activation, you're going to start with H1 blockers, you're going to go through 2 weeks on each one and figure out which combination is the best for you. What? I feel terrible. I don't want to take 15 years to try every single thing that I could try. I want to feel better, yes. And so I really feel like it's on me as the practitioner to do the best that I can to give the recommendations. And I'm not perfect, right? Of course. It's a work in progress. This is the art of medicine. But I do feel like the more that I practice that, the more that I tap into my intuition, the faster and smoother it goes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So huge. So huge. Love what you're doing. Love to hear about the spiritual side of things. I hope it was really, a little bit of an eye-opener here just to hear that it's not another protocol. It's not 5,000 supplements that are going to be the answer, or one magic pill, or hormones for that matter. It's some work, and we have the ability to regain. It's not bad. It's the ability to regain who we were and unforget.
What's a more beautiful thing than that? To unforget who you are. Yes.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for coming on, Dr. McCann. Look forward to putting this one out. And guys, we'll make sure that we've got all of her websites, thespringcenter.com, drkellymccann.com, and even some of the books and folks she mentioned, we will make sure that is in our podcast notes at drjkraussend.com. Thanks again, Kelly, or Dr. Kelly.
That's okay. Thank you, Jannine. Bye-bye, everyone.
Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening.